Recording in progress.
First good question today. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Yudches and Yud Tes. We left off actually at the last line on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. So we're talking about Zman when it comes to Gittin, and why it was decreed by Chazal, the Gabe, either to protect the Nichsei Malug, the Peiros, or to go ahead and perhaps if a woman was acted inappropriately and her husband wanted to cover up for her, let's say she was his niece or whatever it was. So there was machlekes. So Amar le Ravina, bottom line on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Amar le Ravina, Rava. So Ravina says to Rava, Kasvei, Voisvei, because Bekisei. So let's say a husband, he wrote a get. Assumingly he put his man on, he put it in his in his wallet, in his briefcase, and he's going to walk around with it. And if he goes ahead, he's able to go ahead and basically reconcile their relationship, the marriage. Great, then he wouldn't use it, and if not, then he would go ahead and throw away. So what good does the takana do in this case? Right, because this is predated, this situation would l'chara seem to be common. So l'chara, it's no good. A person wouldn't go ahead and do it. In other words, since by him predating it, let's say he's cutting himself off from payros and doing other things, so he's not going to go ahead and do it. So even if you go ahead and pre-writes it, he won't predate it. So therefore, such a case we're not concerned about because he would bring it upon himself. So Amar le Ravina Ravashi Gittin Habayim Medina Siyam the Michlei Benisan V'lei Mati Tishrei. So let's say you get a get that was written in the Pesach time during Nisan, and then it didn't. By the time it traveled all the way to Eretz Yisrael, come to Tishrei. So what good does the takana do? Right? There is no overnight business. Right? First thing, first business morning. Right? There is none of that. So it's going to be predated. No, there's a code, right? It is known that this get was written then, and therefore people know that it's going to be delivered at a way later date, and not to trust the date of where it was written as to when the divorce took place. So Itamar, at what point do we go ahead and we know that a woman gets divorced? She's allowed to remarry, but we say, hold on, wait 3 months until you get married, so there is no confusion as to who the father of the child would be. So wait 3 months. So 3 months from what? Rav on Meshas Nesina. Rav says from the time of the giving of the get. Ushmul Amar Meshas Kasiva, from the date of the get. So Masker Rav Nassim Bar Hoshia Shmuel. So I asked the Kasher of Nazir Baruch to Shmuel, who says it's from the gate of the date of the get. So I understand. You got two women. They're in a little party on June 1st, and the two guys come in. Their husbands, our husbands are here. We're so happy here to join the party. And they said, we're not actually here for a good time for the party. And here's your get, and here's your get. They each give their get. One of them was written on May 1st, and it was written on that day. So in this case, one is going to be a surah in 2 months, and the other one's going to be Materis in 2 months, right? Which will be 3 months from May 1st. So the Abai answers, no, what's the big deal? It's not a contradiction, it's not a big deal, right? Each one has a get that's dated. So you look from the time when it was dated. Thank you very much. And Tanya,
there's the same issue by get if there is by Soto. If he writes the get but has relations to.
So we're going to get to a get yashan, which is going to be an issue. We're going to talk about that. Is it yashana or get yashan? We're going to talk about get yashan. In other words, if there's a time that he is with her, right, and is misyached with her from the time of the writing of the get until it was getting, then that really the get is possible, and we'll explain why. So Tani Kavasi the Rav and Tani Kavasi the Shmuel. We have a Bryce in support of Rav and a Bryce in support of Shmuel. Tani Kavasi the Rav, who said it was 3 months in the time of the divorce. Let's say he sends a get with a messenger to go to his wife, and he delays his travels, takes him 3 months to get there. He finally delivers the get to her. Has to wait 3 months for them. and we're not concerned about a get yashan. What is a get yashan? Let's just see Rashi real quick. So get yashan. What is that? Going to tell you this question? Yeah. So it says the comment. It says later on Tanina. Dein Adam. I'm just reading from Rashi. Tanina. Dein Adam megarish beget yashan. Veizu get yashan. What is a get yashan? Kol shedis yached imam miachash shekasvu la. After he has yichud with her, right? And then he from the time he writes it before he gives it. The Tama Shema Yoimru Gita Kaida Levra. Past what's going to happen? Let's say he wrote it January 1st. Let's just say, and they tried to reconcile things, and then he ended up giving it to her November 1st. All right, whatever. And during that time, he was with her, and she had a child. And then years later, they say, okay, when was the child born? Look at the child's date, and he says, wait, her get was dated January 1st. If you start doing the math, it looks like she had not necessarily that the child would be of Vlabi and Mamzer, but rather he was born out of Znus, right? As Rashi says, right?
He didn't get the gift.
No, because, but we don't know that. We're just looking back. The only thing we know is
10 years later, you look at
10 years later, we just look at the date of the get. So Shema Taimru V'Tela Ben Kasiv Aslan Nesina L'Achazman Yaimru Haget Kadem V'Znus Nisabro, right? That she came pregnant through Znus. So therefore, in this case, why are we concerned about that? So he says, because they did not have yichud. Now, Tiny Kvasi the Shmuel, we have Bryson support of Shmuel, and Shmuel was the one who said we count 3 months from the date of when it was written. Amashish Gelish, the one who goes out and gives his get to a third party for his wife. Hold on to this. Wait, give it to her in 3 months. I'm going to go on a long cruise, and therefore, when she gets it, and she's going to want to holler at me. I'll be far, far away. Give it to her in 3 months. Once he gives it to her, mutter to give it for her to marry immediately because it was dated 3 months earlier. Look at Yasha and we're not concerned about to get Yasha because he did not have yichud with her, and therefore you can go according to the date of the get. And Rav Kahana, Rav Papi, Rav Ashi of the Mishas Kasiva, they did. In other words, when they dealt with these cases, they said wait 3 months from the time of the Kasiva. And Rav Papi, Rav Huna, Rav Yeshua of the Mishas Nasina from the time that the get was delivered. The Hilchasa Mishas Kasiva. The halach is that from the Shas of the Kasiva, the date of the get. Itmar, Memisai, Ksuva Mishametas. Now, we know that a Ksuva is written for a marriage, and the main part, one of the main parts of the Ksuva is what basically how the husband's obligations to the wife in case of that he dies, or when he gets divorced. So he has to go ahead and give her divorced. Let's call it, it's 200 zuz. Let's call it $200 just for simplicity's sake. So he says basically the ksuba, if he goes ahead and divorces her, I have to go ahead and give her money. Now, there's a thing called Shemitah. Every 7 years, right at the end of the 7th year, all previous debts are canceled. But there's certain scenarios where it's not. But it has to be something which is a personal loan, right? A personal loan which is due. A personal loan which is due. That is something that gets canceled. Now. So this ksuba, so let's say the husband divorces her, he doesn't pay her yet, right? At some point, perhaps, potentially, it could be canceled as an outstanding loan that was never repaid. So Rav Omar, Mishativka Vatizka. You have to have 2 conditions. Firstly, he has to go ahead and be polygamous. In other words, he has to, pagam normally means like ruin it. So how do you ruin a get? Because the get says, or the ksuba says, pay 200 zuz. And he pays her $50. So already this ksuba is no longer completely valid because it says you owe her $200. He already paid her 50. So therefore, he basically already, tifko means he already made some sort of payment. He already made some sort of payment, which now, and it was made, we're on Yud Ches Amud Aleph, and also, it is turned into a loan. Right? We'll soon see how it turns into a loan. But basically now, it's as if she has lent him $150 and he still owes her $150 as like a loan repayment. And therefore that could be, or that is canceled by Shemitah. Shmuel Amar, Pegama v'alpishalo zakva, or zakva v'alpishalo pagma. No, even if she went ahead or he made some sort of down payment that proves that this is a current loan, and it gets canceled, or if no payment was made, or it was made into a or if it was made or if it was made into a loan without even any sort of payment, now this loan is canceled by Shemitah.
Get is always considered a chol, right?
So
Regarding the nechasim, the shmubadim, and all that, it's considered.
you say the guy, you saying the ksuba or the guy? Okay, yeah. So it is right. So now we'll soon see that once there's a psak of Beis Din, that Beis Din says, okay, now so till now the kayach of is in the shtar, right? The shtar, I guess they submitted to the Beis Din, and now Beis Din rules they owe her $200. All right. So now the koyach is no longer really in the shtar itself. It's more or less from right. They're psak, right? So therefore, that could potentially
Based in, then
So-
it's not subject to the laws of Shemitah.
So
It's
if
like a principle.
right, so if it is done by base, if it's a Maisa based in, then it's correct. So up until this point, right, we'll soon see at what point is Zakva turns into like a loan. Let's see. So Tanik Vasi the Rav, Tanik Vasi Shmuel, we have Rice for Rav, right? Rice for Shmuel. Tanik Vasi the Rav, maybe say Ksubas Mishabeses. When is a Ksuba Mishametes? When is it canceled by Shemitah? Mishat. Right, and basically, once there's a some sort of payment and it is turned into a loan. However, if there was a payment and it wasn't turned into a loan, or it turned into a loan and not a payment, it is not canceled until both issues are taken care of. And tiny kvasi the Shmuel. So Eddie, this is a little bit going on your part. Let's say a person is ba'anis, a woman, he violates a woman, he owes the family the money for she's no longer a basula, right? She's a bula, he owes the father for damages or kanas, right? Or let's say someone spreads rumors about the woman, we penalize him, pay the father pitui, or he seduces uksuvas isha, and the ksuva of a woman. Shazakfan b'milveh. It was now made into a milveh. It was now considered into a loan. Mishmatin. Then it gets canceled because it's now a loan. In other words, these items, even though it was technically originally a psak from Beis Din, but now you owe this money. So therefore, you owe this money. It's like they lent you money. You got to pay them back. Therefore, it gets canceled. But if it's not a zakvan b'milva, then it does not get canceled. And once they go ahead to Beis Din says you owe this money, so it's no longer for the koyach of the shtar. Therefore, it's like an outstanding balance and a loan, and therefore it has the potential to be canceled by Shemitah. And Omar Shmuel, speaking of Zmanim, so Amar Shmuel, Ksuba k'maisa Beis Din damya. Right, a ksuba is like Maisa Beis Din, and there's Maisa Beis Din nichtam and b'yayim nechlam b'layla, just like a Maisa Beis Din can, let's say they can be issuing during the day and signed at night. Af ksuba nichtavas b'yayim nichtamas b'layla. So too a ksuba can be written during the day and signed at night. This is the ksuba, not the get, right? The get was we talked about the Mishnah. This is the ksuba, so the ksuba can also be written during the day and signed at night. And ksuba said the Rabbi Chia Barav Yichtav B'Yom Yichtav B'Layla. The ksuba of Rabbi Chia Barav that was being it was being written during the day and it was only signed at night. So let's say that night was Yud Ches of the month and they wrote during Yud Zayin, no problem. And Havi Rav Hasan Rav was over there of Lo Yamar V'Lo Midi, and he didn't mention a word. So lema k'Shmuel svirle. So let's see, I'll take Shmuel, right? We just said that Shmuel was the one who says it's no big deal. It's like Ma'aseh Beis Din, right? And therefore you can write it during the day and sign it at night. So my answer is no, not necessarily. I was like Shmuel because Asukim b'Isa Inyan, they were dealing with the ksuba all day. Now they didn't go ahead and write the ksuba and take a break and then come back and sign in the evening. Rather, they're dealing with it all day. The time learned by some of the Sadak Lo Shanu El Asukim b'Isa Inyan. Only if they're not dealing with the matter. Aval Asukim b'Isa Inyan. But if they were dealing with that matter, then kasher. Then we'll say that the ksuba is still kasher. You don't need to come on to Shmuel's heter. Fine. 5 lines from the bottom, 2 dots, Yud Ches and Aleph. So he said, actually, the Mishnah on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, right in the wide lines. So we're talking about over there. It was signed. It was written and signed during different times. It's no good. However, the last case, we said Biyom, v'nichta b'layla. If it was written during the day and signed at night, in other words, let's say the day was Yud Zayin and the night is, let's say, Yud Ches. So we said Pasal, Tanakam says Pasal, Rabbi Shimon Machshir, Rabbi Shimon says it's okay. Because Rabbi Shimon said all really shtaros are no good if it's signed at a different halachic day, except for Giti Nashim or Mekel. Or Mekel in the case of Giti Nashim, that even though the get was written during the day, it can be signed at night. That was Rabbi Shimon. So Zok the Gemara, Amar Rav my time to Rabbi Shimon. What's the reason called Rabbi Shimon? Kasaver Kevan Shenasa Einav Lagarsha Shuvein La Peiros. Once he sets his eyes, right, and he basically starts the process of divorcing her, so then at that point he loses out on the peiros, and therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon, you're worried that he's going to take peiros that are there were not owed to him. So she's allowed to go ahead and block that and say, hey, you started having the get written on Yud Zayin or whatever it was, and therefore you're no longer allowed any of the profits from the Nichsei Maluk. And
so it's not even a chatima, it's right when you start to write it.
and that was right, exactly. That's in terms of the pairs. In terms of the pairs, right? Very good. According to Rabbi Shimon. Now, as long as it takes, let's see if that's true. So I'm Reish Lakish Rabbi Shimon Elli Alter. That which we say you can sign it on a different day than it was written. It doesn't mean months later. Rather, it only means alter immediately after, i.e., during the day and the following night, one day. But let's say there's an extended period of time, let's say 10 days, then you cannot go ahead and do it. So Reish Lakish says only immediately. In other words, the next day. Rabbi Yochanan, excuse me, because why? We're concerned that if you leave 10 days, then perhaps they'll go ahead and appease, perhaps they'll go ahead and be together, and then it'll be a get yashan. So therefore, we're concerned about that. Therefore, we only allow this special heter by Gittin only to be, the next day or the following night. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Afilu Mikan V'Adasara Yamim. This is no, even 10 days later. If he does appease her and they're back together, so there people will know there'll be a call. Everyone's going to know that is going to be the situation, and we're not worried about a get yashan. They'll be forced to write a new one. So 3 lines on the top in Yud Ches Amud Beis. Itmar Amar Liasara Kisvu Gel Ishti. Turn to 10 people. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So he tells you guys, write a get for my wife. So what's going on here? So Rabbi Yochanan, Shnayim Mishum Eidim, V'Kulam Mishum Tanai. All the 10 people there, they got to sign. Now, 2 of which are going to sign because a get needs Eidus. And the other 8, why are they signing? Because the guy said, you guys give it, write a get for my wife. So when he says write a get for my wife, he basically means it's like a condition. In other words, everybody will sign on it. And that's the condition I want my get to be given, right? Same thing if he says, right, go ahead and run a mile, right, and then give the get. So this is the condition. Everybody signs.
Kitvu always means.
So we have does kitvu also mean chisma, right? To sign. So let's see. So we're soon going to see what situation we're talking about. But that is the implied. When he writes write, he means write, sign, and deliver. Reish Lakish Amar Kulam Mishum Eidim. Everyone has to sign. But everyone signs as Eidim. In other words, this guy seems to want, for whatever reason, 10 Eidim on the get. Say, what is this scenario? If he doesn't use the word kulchem, right? We learn in the Amar le'asara kisvu get li'ishti. One writes kisvu get li'ishti, echad koisev, v'shnayim choismin. What he's really saying is just write and get a good, kosher, valid get to my wife. In other words, one of you guys write it, and 2 people sign, and that's it. The other 7, right, or 8, right, don't have to do anything. But over in our case, everyone seems to say they all have to sign. Just the question is, are they signing because he wants them all to be witnesses, or he's signing it because basically it's a condition on the get? Ella diamar lahu kulchem. Rather, he says over here kulchem. Basically, he's saying all of you, right? And when we say right, as Azi pointed out, it means also write, sign, and deliver to my wife. So my benahi, what's the difference between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan? So well, let's say here's one. Let's say 2 of them. Let's say that let's say that they signed. 2 of them signed, it was written, and they only signed 10 days later. Right? They only signed 10 days later after it was written.
But then we get.
Or the other ones, right? Or two of them signed that day, and the other eight signed 10 days later. So man, the Mishum Tanai, the one who says is a condition as long as all of you sign the get. So kosher, it's kosher, right? Because the condition was fulfilled. He never said all of you signed today. He said all of you signed. They all signed. Who cares which day? Doesn't make a difference. But if it says Adam, then it's puzzle. Then it'll be puzzle in such a situation. Why? Because we just learned that you should not go ahead and delay. Right, the signature should be done on the same day, and at most, right, the Rabbi Shimon is machshir, right, one night, right, lefi Reish Lakish. So therefore, that would be puzzle. This get would be puzzle. Or kaven shinizacham karo puzzle. So let's say one or two of the witnesses were found to be kar or puzzle who signed. So lamad der mishum tonight, the one who says is a condition everyone signs. So kasha is fine because we don't care that they're kasha witnesses. We don't, right? All we care about is that that they signed and they signed it because he wasn't an aid. But if you say, hey, they signed because they are witnesses, then they are puzzled. Then they are puzzled in this case because one of them is related. And even though you have a group of 100 witnesses, if one of them become puzzled, you don't just say, okay, take them out. We have 99 witnesses. No, since they came as one group, they all gets thrown out. And what about this case? Let's say the first signature was somebody who was a Karav apostle. So Amila is kasha, Amila apostle. Some says kasha, some say apostle. Amila kasha, they say kasha because tonight because of condition, and therefore we don't care if you sign first. And Amila apostle, one says apostle. No, if people might see, even though it was a condition, but people might see that there was a apostle or Karav who was signed at the top. People might assume, you could use apostle for kiyum shtaros, right? There's a shtaryer, kiyum shtaros yam, and therefore they got confused, and therefore we say no. If a Karav apostle, signed at the top, we don't allow it. Fine. A person said to 10 people, Kisvu get lishti, right? A get for my wife. Chasum beitrei minayu b'yaymei. 2 of them signed during that day. The Inach Mikan V'Asar Yom. The other ones, the other 8, eventually signed over the next 10 days. And also the Kamei Rabbi Shimon Levi. This case became before Rabbi Shimon Levi. And Amar Le, he said to them, Kedai hu Rabbi Shimon Yismach Lev Shasat Chak. During a time of urgency, right? It's okay to rely upon the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that even though it was written during the day and it wasn't signed till later on, it's okay. We signed later on. So Gemara says, even going to Rabbi Shimon, we had the Shita of Reish Lakish, who says that which he said you can sign late, it's only the following night. You can't do it 10 days later. So he answers, no, he holds like Rabbi Yechanan in that situation that you got even up to, let's say, 10 days. Well, according to Rabbi Yechanan, right? He said that only 2 of them were witnesses and the other 8 as just a condition. So he says, no, but Rabbi Shimon Svilei and Reish Lakish Svilei. And then he holds like Reish Lakish. So when it comes to this case, and they're all later, they're all later to sign immediately. So then he holds that Shimon Levi holds that Shimon Levi, right? Rabbi Shimon Levi holds that it's okay that Lafi Rabbi Shimon, he holds like Rabbi Yechanan that it could be up to 10 days. Fine. Naya Mishnah. What time is it? 7:10. Okay, we're doing good. Fine. Zok the Mishnah, the Chol Kaisvin. You can write with whatever material, the dio, the sam, the sikra, the kumus, the kantum. You can go ahead and write, and the Gemara will explain these things with ink, with paint, like a red ink or red dye. Type of gum also, which creates a writing, and this sulfate that's like sort of like a black sulfate. Come to the whole davar shu shel kaimer, or anything that will last, permanent. And ein kaisin loy b'mashkin, but you can't write with liquids, v'loy b'meiperos or fruit juices, or something that does not last. Ala kol kaisin, you can write it on anything. Ala shalzayis, on a leaf of a tree, an olive tree. Karen shalpara, or even the horn of an animal. The nice and less apara that if you write a horn of an animal, you just give her the entire animal. You go ahead and you write it on to maybe I don't know, tattoo it on or whatever, and then that of an eved. The nice and less eved, then you give her the eved. No, you can't write it on something that is alive or something that is food. Fine, that was the Mishnah. So now, first the Gemara goes into just describing those materials that one writes with. So diusa, that's the type of ink, and sam is sama, paint. Sikra, and that's like there's this red dye. We said Chana sikrasa shema. It's called sikrasa, right? Type of red ink. Kumus is this gum kama and kankantum. This sulfate. Samarab Chana amashmua charasa dush kafi. Right. That is basically used by the what's it called? By the shoemakers. Right. This black. This is blackening agent. The chol davar shu miskayim, and you can use anything that lasts is permanent. So okay, so we listed a bunch of things. Then he said anything that's permanent. So those are also permanent. So what are you coming to include that was not on the list? So asuye mai, asuye hadatani Rebbe Chanina, kasu b'meitaria b'afza. You go ahead and you write it right with a type of, I guess, meitaria, a dirty rainwater. Or walnut juice, I guess something that lasts, that is kosher.
But not something that doesn't last.
Right. I didn't even know what a gallnut is. I just so we had that. What is it? Huh?
So something
I have to
that
Google
will
it.
fade over time.
Something fade is not good, right? So we saw afza earlier. That's used. Well, actually, we'll see it again. That's used something to treat parchment to make it permanent.
That's cool. It's a thing.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are we googling?
The part didn't make it up, okay.
Yeah. Fine.
Explains well. So
The
they-
tani-
they make some permanent on the actual you're signing, right?
What?
Gona juice.
Well, that's a type of. We've seen golden juice now. That actually the Gemara is going to bring up very soon.
From an oak tree.
So what is
I
it?
don't remember.
From an oak
It's
tree.
been a while.
It's like a sap. It's So we've actually mentioned it twice. We've actually mentioned gallnut is that which treats parchment to make writing on it permanently. We saw that with the Shtar Parsai, right? That's one. And now over here we see that it can also be used as a permanent writing.
It says here they're collected and ground to be used as
Oh.
dyeing, so they're used
Alright.
to dyes.
The key that it's not washed away. no?
Yeah.
It has to be permanent, right? That's what I'm saying.
Whatever
Yeah.
I did was think it's permanent.
And Tani Reb Chia, Kasu, the Aver, B'Shachor, B'Shichur, Kasher. If you write it, I guess with lead or these other types of blackening agents, right? Then it is kasher, right? How does it define these other blackening agents? Right, Shichur is what is this over there? Yeah, charcoal and Charsa, the others, the others from a shoemaker,
Graphite.
right?
Graphite.
So those are used. So therefore, those are permanent. So Itamar. Hamavir. So now we're going to go another subject, which we'll bring it back to this. Hamavir dio agabe sikar b'Shabbos. So let's say there is red ink, right? Let's say there's a word written on Shabbos, red ink says I don't know, go, right? 2 letters will say go, right? And he writes on top of that with black, all right? So on Shabbos. Rabbi Yechon, Reish Lakish, Dari Tavaya, they both say chayiv shtayim. It's chayiv for 2 malachos. Achas mishum kaiseh, one for writing, even though he wrote over, but now this is more permanent. This is a better writing, so therefore it's chayiv. V'achas mishum meichik, and also because he erased the red word of go, right? So he erased, and he wrote. So you see, putting black on top of red constitutes writing. Okay, that's what we take out from here.
Constitutes erasing.
And erasing. So dio al gabi do, but let's say you just wrote black ink on black, or sikra, the red on sikra, then it's pater. That is pater because you haven't done anything, right? You didn't do no new writing and no new erasing. Sikra agave dio. Let's say you put the red on top of the black. Amalei chayiv, Amalei pater. Some say chayiv, some say pater. Amalei chayiv, meichechu. The one says chayiv because you erased. In other words, even though you didn't make a better reading, but you erased that which was written before. It's not as good anymore. And Amalei pater, I would say pater because mekalkal, because that which you go ahead and covered up, it wasn't done in a productive way. It was basically you had a better writing and you made it worse, right? So therefore, you be pater because it's mekalkal. So what does that have to do with that? Us, let's see. If you have witnesses that do not know how to sign, right? Right. So now is write it in red and then have them write over. They don't know how to sign their name, and then they'll sign over with the black.
Stencil it on the.
Right. So,
well,
but first write in red, then write in black. So no, it's not considered to be right. So wait, we just learned that the Gabi Shabbos that if I go ahead and write black on top of red, it constitutes writing to the point that I'm chayiv a carbon, right? So over here, if it constitutes writing, it should be writing when it comes to Gitin Hashim. In other words, yes, we're talking about in Svar, right? We're talking about in Svar that l'chayra it's writing. If it's a writing, therefore you should be chayiv for Shabbos. But we're not going to necessarily go ahead and use it and depend upon that for Gitin Hashim, right? And we're not going to necessarily do that. We're talking about in Svar. And Itamar Edom Shein Yodim Lichtaim. So witnesses did not know how to sign. Rav Makar them Niyar Chalak Malim Ezakrai. We go ahead, we tear up a piece of paper for them, right? And we go ahead action there for you scratch it there, and they have them go ahead and fill it out with Ezakrai with ink. So basically, we etch it out and they fill it in with ink. Shmuel Omar. To color it in, right.
Like make a stencil.
Right. But that was maybe even later a little bit less, right? Because that's at least the black outliners, right? So over here, Shmuel Amar Be'aver, he says with lead. So it says, what do you mean? You write it with lead and they write over Be'aver Sakodaisach, Vatani Reb Chia, Kisu Be'aver, V'Shifra. We said earlier, right, with lead or charcoal is other blackening agents, that is kosher. That itself is writing. So I can't sign their name in lead first and they draw over it, right? Because it is already written by me. So like Kasha, Haba Avra, Haba Maya, Davra. One is if it's lead that was not mixed with water. So that's not writing. That won't last because it wasn't, it was just, sort of scraped out. So therefore, that's what we said. Maybe write it without water because that's not considered to be writing. And then you write over it with ink. And the other case we said it does constitute writing was if it was written with lead that was already mixed with water. Revo Omar b'mei milin. All right, we're back to the gallnut juice, right? So you write it with gallnut juice and write on top of it with black. You write it with dirty rainwater, which is permanent, or gallnut juice, then it's kosher because it's permanent writing. So how could you write in permanent writing, sign it for them permanent writing, they sign over it, you already wrote it permanent writing. So they kasha, how the office, how the law office, right? No, if it's double. If it was written on parchment, right, that already had gallnut juice, right, then so then I think it's the opposite, right? In this case. So then over here, if the cloth was already worked with fatzim, then it will wash off, right? Right. If you do gallnut juice on gallnut juice, then it's not recognizable, right? But if it was not treated and then you write with gallnut juice on top of it, then it would be permanent. So that was the case where we said it would work. If it wasn't treated with gallnut juice, then you could sign a gallnut juice. If you already treated with it, then maybe you could write it first in gallnut juice because that's not permanent because it doesn't last on its own. And therefore, then you come over and write it with dio. Because in other words, gallnut juice does not last, it's not permanent on top of meimilin, on its own type of juice. Rav Papa ma beroik, Rav Papa. Rav Papa le Papa Ture Baruch. So too. So I guess Rav Papa they taught they should do it like with spit, right? You do with spit, with saliva, and that shows they sign over it, and that would be effective. Hani mili begit. This is only when it comes to getting divorce documents by married women. When it comes to other shtaros, then we don't say that. we say, you know what, go find witnesses who know how to sign. It's not an emergency situation. Find the good Adim who know how to read and sign the name. Because one time they did with sharshtaros, the witness did not know how to go ahead and sign, and they basically, sort of, spit and had him sign over it. And then now they Rav Kana, and Rav Kana says, you know what, these guys get malchus for doing that. So he was not did not approve of such behavior by using this leniency when it comes to sharshtaros. And Tanya Kavose, the Rav, we have a brisa to support of Rav. So witnesses that do not know how to go ahead and sign. So we go ahead and we cut into the document. In other words, we basically etch into their space for them to go ahead and sign, and then they go ahead and fill in those spots, and that is their signature. So I'm only talking about however, when it comes to freeing slaves, and other types of, let's say, collection documents. If they know how to read and sign, then they sign. And if not, then we do not go ahead and have them sign. Go find yourself other witnesses. So the Gemara says, who's talking about reading? Right? Why are you talking about reading? So the Gemara says, no, really, it's missing a part of this, but how should I? If you have witnesses that do not know how to read, then currently fneim. Then you read it before the v'chais, and then they sign. But those who don't know how to sign, then you go ahead and get others, unless it's Gitin Hashim. And if they know how to read, then then they go. If they know how to read and sign, then they sign. And then they don't go ahead and sign. And Omar Rebbe Elazar, my time at Rosh Gamliel, Shaloyei Benois Yisrael Agunos. In other words, if we go ahead and we don't allow these witnesses, perhaps, okay, well, wait for us to find other witnesses, they can't find, meanwhile, the guy disappears, whatever it is, so we don't want the woman to remain in a guna, and therefore we have some leniencies when it comes to signing the Gita. And Amar Rava Halacha Rosh Gamliel, the halacha is like Rosh Gamliel. Rav Gamda Mishmei the Rava Omar Ein Halacha. The halacha is not like him in this case, right? The halacha is, in other words, in this case, we do not allow. Let me just see for a second. We do not allow in this case the what's called the leniency of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Velakaman, who's like Karabanan. So you say it's the Rabbanan that, in other words, even by Sharshtaros. So how could you say that even by Sharshtaros you can go ahead and use this leniency? If we find the case that that where they did do that, this leniency, and Rav Kana gave them malchus. So take on a kriya. So therefore, no, say that case. So he was talking about the kriya. Wasn't talking about depending on witnesses. Depending on witnesses, Sharshtaros, everyone agrees you got to look for somebody else, and everyone is like Gitanashim or Mako. So what was he arguing about? He was saying about reading, right? In other words, he was arguing, says that if you can't go ahead and read it, right? If they can read it, then you read it to them and then they sign. So that which he argues on. No, you don't read it to them. If they can't read it, you find someone else who can read it because they don't know what. Right? You don't know who's what they're reading. Maybe you can't trust them. So soon see cases. Rav Yehuda mitzdarek kari v'chas. Nevertheless, Rav Yehuda, when he was older, a little sickly. Nevertheless, he had difficulty, but nevertheless, he forced himself to be able to read the shtar, and then only then did he sign. He didn't have them read it to him. In other words, you have to read it yourself while you're signing. And Amar le'ula le'tzichas, he didn't have to do it. Rabbi Elazar, Mardi Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Elazar was like the master of Eretz Yisrael. Karu kamei v'chasin. They used to go ahead and read before him, and he would sign. For Rav Nachman, karu kamei safid daini. And then the special judges who were slave for him, they used to go ahead and read before Rav Nachman, and then he would sign. So you see that even these chashiv rabbanim, they didn't read the shtaros itself. It was read to them, and only then would they sign. So where answers no. The Dafka Rav Nachman v'Safid Daini, and Dafka, it was specifically Rav Nachman who was a great rabbi, and these Seifrim who had special respect for him. These lo amasa, because they had fear. No, they had fear that they would never not read him what was actually there. They wouldn't try and trick him or something that he wanted to hear. in order for him to sign. They would tell him exactly because of the respect and fear for him. But if it was Rav Nachman and it was other Seifrim, or a Savi Daini Vini Shachrini, or the special Seifrim, but it was in front of someone who wasn't Chashuv, then not necessarily you can rely. But if it was someone who was so Chashuv, and the people who had a reverence for that said individual, they would obviously read exactly what is in front of them. And Rav Papa, Kihavi Asi Lakame Shtara Parsai, when he would have these Shtara Parsai, which was written in Persian, he didn't really understand the language. The Avi, Arkai Shakusim, that was made in the courts of Kusim, Makbilu Lishne Kusim, Zeh, Shaloi B'fnei Zeh. He would actually have two different Kusim. Read to him what the shtar said, not in front of the other, but Mesich Lefi Tumo, right? And just sort of like, not like officially, but just, tell me what the shtar says. And you do it separately, and each one would sort of describe what's in the shtar in order, and they could not hear one another. So therefore, and then he would know it was legit because then, they weren't, they had their guards down and they still read to what it said. And if they said the same thing, then he knows it was, that's what the shtar said. And is so much to the point that he would go ahead and, he would give the stamp of approval and even allow this shtar to be used to collect items or fields or whatever, which were perhaps sold by the by the bar. And Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Li, Rav Huna Barnas, and Hachi Amar Ramemer, Hai Shtar Parsai Dechas Me'Allah Saad Yisrael. So these Persian documents that was signed by Jewish witnesses, then you can go ahead and collect them even from Yishvadim. So we saw this earlier, this Gemara. They don't know how to read it, so who says they signed it properly? But the other, we're talking about Jewish witnesses that knew how to go ahead and sign. The Persian documents written on regular paper, and you need documents to be collectible on something that can't be tampered with. So our answer is these are already treated with golna juice from the oak tree. I usually have you have a summary at the bottom. Right, and you don't have that in these Persian documents. Go on, and that's a bit of a hadar. We're talking about a case where on the shtar it did repeat it. So my kamash malon, right? Come teach us the whole lashon kasher. They come teach us what that a document in any language is kasher. So Tanina, we already learned that once. Get shekisub ivris ve'edav Yavanis or Yavanis ve'edav ivris. If a get was written, let's say in Hebrew, but it was signed in Greek, or it was written in Greek and signed by ivris, kasher. Then it's kosher. So you see, we already have something that could be a shek we call lashon. So if it was that case, have a mina hani really be gitin. Maybe there's the only thing about the gitin. Gitin hashival shar shtaros lo. Maybe other shtaros cannot. Kamash Mulan. We also say shtar shtaros. Omar Shmuel, right? 3/4 of the way down on Yud Testament base. Omar Shmuel, nasan la niyar chaluk. He gave her basically a blank page. And Amar Leh, he told her, Hareza Gitech, this is your get. Migureshes. She is Migureshes. Why is that? Right? Visibly. Chayshinan Shema B'mei Milin Kisvu. Perhaps it was done in some sort of golna juice, right? And it, you can't see it now. It's sort of wiped off. But at the time, right, that it's written on there. So Gemara says Meisve. So what's going on here, right? She's divorced here. Hareza Gite. Yeah. Hareza Gite.
Take a blank piece of paper. You know what to do.
So let's see if that works. Hareza Gite. But a guy says he hands his wife, "Here's your get." Right, a rolled up piece of paper. She takes it and she immediately throws it into the sea or into a fire or something else that destroys it. So he gave her this piece of paper, it was rolled up. She took it, threw it in the fire. But she took it.
She believes it's totally kosher.
So v'chazar v'amar, and then all of a sudden he maybe didn't want to divorce her. He says, you know what, shtar pasimu, shtar manahu. It was a shtar pasim, right? These different types of documents. Shtar pasim is basically a document that says that people owe you money, and therefore to show like you're wealthy, or shtar mana, right? It's basically a pre-written loan document. Basically, it's a different type of document. It was not a get. That's what he's saying. Oh, I didn't really divorce you.
Yeah, right.
Good, you didn't open it because it was something else, right? Mm-hmm. We don't believe him. she's divorced,
Correct.
right? Velo kol emena lo isra. And right, basically she says, oh, you divorced me. He says, no, I never divorced you. What do you mean? You gave me the get. He says, no, it was a different document. No, we don't listen to him. And he can't go ahead and stop her from going ahead and marrying somebody else. All right. So Tamadika Ksav. The only reason here, because there was stuff written on it, she just didn't really read it, right? But we saw there was writing on it. So Tamadika Ksav, Halak Ksav, low. But if there's nothing written on it, then he has no, we don't think it's a get, right? So we don't think it's a get in any situation. So Kikamar Shmuel, when did Shmuel, was the Shmuel say? All right. So when did Shmuel say the blank piece of paper, right? Oh, it was a get, right? Dibatkina lay b'maya dinar. Right, so we go ahead and I guess we check, right, this type of ink. You go ahead and you go over it, right? This type of colored water or dye that would make anything that was written on this paper from before sort of appear. Yeah. So eat pallet. So if something appears, then it appears. Vila pallet lav klubo. But if you go ahead and you test it and nothing was there, then we're not chosh at all. So the Gemara says, "V'chipalit my havi," right? I understand you tested my havi. So even if you test it, what makes the difference? Hashtu the palit. Maybe only now, right? It appears, but back then when he gave it to her, it didn't appear. So Shmuel nami chayshinan kamar. When Shmuel says she's divorced, not that she's divorced. Is that we're chayshish? Perhaps that he just gave her a get. We have to be a chayshish. Let's say, she was eating truma based on him or whatever it was. Then we have to be a chayshish that perhaps at the time it was legible or something that could be seen, and therefore we should be a chayshish for the divorce. And Amar Ravina Marliya Meimer Hachem Mereimer Mishmei Dravdimi Hani Beitrei Diyav Kite Kamayu. So those people that when they deliver a get, they have to go ahead and read the get. So Meisve Hareza Gite. One second. So let's say a guy says, okay, here's her getting tons of his Yama. She goes ahead and takes it, throws on the seal, or the Chodever Shabbat, or she throws it, burns it, or something else that destroys it. The Chazav Yamar Shtar Pasimu Shtar Manu, and says, no, it's a document. Then we say in such a case, it's she's still Megureshes, right? But he doesn't have the power to go ahead and ask her anything else. I understand if you say they have to read the document, so you hand the document, it has to be read, right? So basa the kruya mi matzi amalaha, right? As a mi matza amalai hachi. So if they read it, how could he ever come back? And why would you potentially believe that it was shtar pasim or shtar mana, right? The type of shtar, they read it. If you're holding it like the Adim, let's say the Adim Masir, that we say Harez Zagit, even he gets it has to be read to the person. Right? Hani, so who has to be read? So you want to be Michalik, 1 second. Right, the Adim is Sira, but in this case, no, I hear if there's no Adim Sira, maybe it was just him to her. But there has to be the witnesses to say that he was the one who they saw that she received it. No, nobody's done it. Any delivery of a get, when a husband gives it to her, there has to be basically read before them. Now, right, so he says no. Maybe that case is now we're talking about, right? They were talking about the basa de kare alala beidina, right? And maybe they read it, and then he put it back in his briefcase, right? The basa de kare alala beidina, and then he opened up his briefcase and gave her, assumingly that same, right, the old switch, and basically that which was given him. Just said chalfe. Maybe he was switched out for something else. So Kamash Malon, that since we heard it, that was being read, right? And therefore, then even though it was time later, then he gave it to her. So therefore, we say no, it was that same one. How go with the Zara like Gita? The man went ahead and he threw a get to his wife. Lebene Dani, I guess a bunch of jars. So he threw her the get. This is your get. They read it. Potentially, right? And they threw it to her, and Ishtarech mezuzasa. So they went to amongst the jars to find out what it was. All of a sudden, here's the I see the parchment. They open up the parchment, and it's a mezuzah. It's a mezuzah he gave her, right? Not a get. Some Rav Nachman mezuzasa, right? Bene dani leshchicha. So a mezuzah is not common to find amongst the jars. So it must have been that piece of paper that he gave her, which he claimed was the get, was really, this was the piece of paper, it was a mezuzah, and therefore she's not divorced. Only if you find one. But if you find two or three there, then right? You say, no, if there was others there were a bunch of mezuzahs there, so we can't say, oh, the piece of paper that he gave was a mezuzah, and there also happen to be other mezuzahs there. There's other mezuzahs there, we'll say that those were there. Where's the get? It must be that some sort of mouse or rodent there ran off with it, and therefore he did give her a divorce document. How Gavra? What time is it? Okay, we're good. How Gavra? The Kanishta. It was someone who went to the shul, Shakal Sefer Torah. He took the Sefer Torah. He gives it to his wife. Amalai ha gitech. Here is your get. So Rav Yosef. This says Rav Yosef. I understand. Why were you even concerned? Why were you even concerned by such a case? If you're worried about maybe what was written on the Sefer Torah, maybe there was something written on the back of it in gold nut juice, right? It was saying that this is your get. Well, this is Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah, the parchment is treated with gall nut juice. Meimilin does not go onto Meimilin, so there can't be chayshish that was written on Meimilin on it. And Amishum creases. If you're worried about, hey, it needs to be the cost of law. Sefer creases, and it calls Amishum creases. These ba habina the cost of law lishma. The leka has to be written lishma, and it wasn't. And maybe he was the one who had the Sefer Torah written, and when he told him, write this for my wife, right? You need his name, her name, and you don't have that here. And you don't have it in the situation. So there's no names written in there, so it can't be good as a get. So if that's okay, what's the chiddush? Rav Yosef, my kamashma. So what's the chiddush here, right? So obviously it doesn't work. Shein meimilin al gabi meimilin. Basically, the chiddush is that if you write something on gold nut juice on a parchment that's treated with gold nut juice, then that is not permanent. That will not last, and therefore that will never be kosher as a get. All right, we'll stop here. Everybody. Tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, we normal time.